I remember standing on the balcony of my hotel suite, the ocean stretching out before me, sun glinting off the waves in a way that should have made my heart light. My phone buzzed in my hand, and when I saw Brandon's name, my chest tightened. I could feel his unease through the line, a tension that made my pulse race. The hotel room keys weren't working, he told me, and he wanted me to come down and help. In that moment, I realized that the family I had poured my love and effort into had no idea what was coming. They thought I was just the mother who always fixed everything, the one who would handle the money, the logistics, the headaches, and the disappointments. But not this time. I glanced down at the pool, seeing them there, carefree, laughing, oblivious. Chelsea's sharp laughter carried across the courtyard, Lucas tossing the younger children into the water, while Piper waved at me shyly. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, anticipation, a quiet thrill that I was finally in control. I let my gaze linger on that scene, committing it to memory. For so long, I had been invisible in their plans, a shadow they included only out of obligation. I thought back to the phone call that started it all, the call that had made my heart swell with hope and naive trust. Brandon's voice had been full of excitement, painting a picture of family togetherness that felt almost like a dream. I remembered nodding along in my kitchen, listening to the winter sun spill across my counter, imagining laughter and shared meals. I had no idea that my name, my signature, my savings, and even my wedding ring would soon become a tool in a plan that was not as innocent as it seemed. The irony of standing there, on my own balcony, knowing the family below had schemed to take advantage of my generosity without a hint of guilt, made my hands tighten around the phone. But instead of fear or despair, a calm resolve began to settle over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for without even knowing it, the moment where all the planning, all the careful saving, all the quiet sacrifices became the foundation for something I had never allowed myself before taking charge. Drawing a line and finally letting them understand that I was not just their wallet, their problem, or the quiet figure in the background. I sipped my coffee, letting the warm taste anchor me. The sun was still low, and the ocean breeze carried a sense of clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do next, and it was not about confrontation. It was about quiet authority, patience, and letting the truth unfold in the way only I could orchestrate. I felt my pulse steady as I looked down once more at Brandon and Lucas, still certain their plan was safe. They were about to learn how wrong they were. This was the beginning, the first step in a week that would not be defined by their expectations, but by the choices I made for myself and for the one granddaughter who truly understood me. Piper. I've always thought of myself as someone quietly holding our family together, the one who made sure everyone had what they needed, even when it meant putting my own comfort last. Life in Harbor Ridge had been simple but steady since my husband passed 4 years ago. I filled my days baking pies for the Sunday market, sewing for neighbors, and keeping our home in order, surrounded by the echo of laughter from years past. My sons, Brandon and Lucas, had grown into busy men with families of their own. Brandon, 38, had a quick laugh, but a way of brushing past the quiet sacrifices I'd made. Lucas, 35, was more serious, married to Brooke, who seemed to measure people before speaking. The grandchildren brought me joy, each in their own way. But Piper, Lucas's 17-year-old daughter, was different. She noticed when I grew quiet, and she often stayed with me in the kitchen, listening to stories, asking questions, and sharing her thoughts without judgment. I treasured those moments more than I ever told anyone. So when Brandon called with his brilliant idea about a family trip to Sab Shore Resort, I allowed myself to believe in it, to feel included in the way I hadn't in years. The idea of pools, restaurants, and games for the children made my chest tighten with a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. I thought this was our chance to reclaim some of the good old days, a week where everyone would finally make space for me, not just as a mother or grandmother, but as part of the family. There was a detail that I initially brushed aside. The hotel required one person to pay the deposit up front. Brandon assured me they would reimburse me, and I believed him. After all, I had always been the one to manage the logistics, the one to take care of the details. For so long, I had accepted this role without complaint. But there was a quiet voice in the back of my mind, wondering if this time would be different. I remember calling the resort and learning the total cost for 5 family suites for 7 nights was $4,200, with $2,100 due immediately as a deposit. My heart had lurched. My pension brought in only $800 a month, and my savings were modest at best. I thought about the small cash I had tucked away, and even the emergency fund hidden in a jar of flour. I felt the weight of the responsibility pressing down on me, and yet, I made a choice. I would make this happen. I would find a way. That evening, I sold my wedding ring, a small diamond that had been a lifetime with my husband, and added it to my savings. Along with the money earned from selling pies at the market, every sacrifice carried the same promise. This week was for family, for love, for the hope that we could be together as we once were. I could feel the mixture of pride and anxiety as I completed the payment. My name was now on 5 suites, 7 nights, 12 people. In my mind, I pictured us laughing by the pool, sharing meals, creating memories that would outlast the quiet years of routine. Little did I know, the reality awaiting me at Sab Shore would challenge every expectation I had built, and that the betrayal I was about to uncover would change not just the week, but how I saw the family I had worked so hard to support. Even now, I can feel the hope and vulnerability of that moment, the belief that love and effort were enough to hold a family together. And yet, sometimes, hope alone isn't enough. That realization would come sooner than I ever expected. This set the stage for the week ahead, where trust would collide with deception, and where I would need to choose between being used or standing up for myself, choices that would lead to lessons I could never unlearn. Once I had made the reservation, the reality of what I'd promised hit me fully. Scraping together $2,100 wasn't just a task. It became a test of endurance, patience, and quiet determination. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late at night, notebook open, pencil in hand, calculating every possible way to cover the deposit. My pension only brought in $800 a month. My emergency savings barely scratched the surface. Selling pies at the Sunday market had always been a simple pleasure, but suddenly it was a lifeline. Every crust, every careful fold of dough, carried a weight I hadn't anticipated. I also thought about my wedding ring, the one small circle of gold that had held 42 years of memories. Selling it was not easy. I ran my fingers over it for hours, remembering the day Robert had placed it on my hand, the quiet pride we shared, the years we spent building a life together. But the love I carried for my family pushed me forward. I sold the ring, adding the $800 I received to my other savings, Each sacrifice felt like a small crack in my heart, but I told myself it was worth it. It had to be. As December rolled by, I quietly cut corners in my daily life. The thermostat stayed low. I walked instead of taking the bus. I sewed late into the night to make a few extra dollars. Each decision whispered the same promise: this trip was for my family, for the joy of seeing them together, for the hope that we could reclaim some of what we'd lost. When the morning of the trip arrived, I dressed in a light blue dress Piper had once told me made me look younger. I pinned on my mother's pearl necklace, the one she had given me when I was a newlywed, and I packed my modest suitcase. There was a nervous thrill in stepping out the door, a sense that this journey would be different from all the others. I could see Brandon's car waiting, him honking impatiently, Chelsea scrolling on her phone, the younger children fidgeting in the back. I reminded myself to smile, to keep up appearances, because this was the role I had always played. Driving to Sab Shore Resort, I tried to picture the joy that awaited us. The white facade gleamed under the winter sun, tall palms swaying in the ocean breeze. The lobby shimmered with polished marble and chandeliers, and I felt my heart lift. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe in the week ahead, in laughter, shared meals, and the warmth of family together. But even as I walked toward the reception desk, keycards in hand, something in the quiet tugged at me. Piper lingered near my side, excitement in her eyes, but the rest of the family had vanished toward the elevators. My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a quiet, uneasy curiosity. Why were they moving on without me? Why had they left before even checking in? I remember holding the keycards tightly, feeling the weight of all my sacrifices, all the late nights, every pie, every penny, and every decision that had led to this moment. For the first time, the reality that something wasn't right began to settle over me, and in that quiet unease, I realized that the week ahead might not be the joyful reunion I had imagined. Instead, it could become a test not of my generosity, but of my resolve, my courage, and my ability to reclaim the respect and control I had too long surrendered. That evening, I sat in my room, staring out at the waves, letting the quiet settle. The anticipation had shifted into something more concrete. I had a choice. I could let myself be used, or I could take the steps to ensure that my efforts, my sacrifices, and my dignity were not wasted. That decision, though still unspoken, marked the turning point that would lead to a confrontation far more significant than I had ever anticipated. It was Piper who first noticed something off, the quiet, observant one who had always seen through my polite smiles and hidden worries. She pulled me aside, her phone trembling in her hands, showing me the messages that made my stomach drop. A group chat labeled Family Drama Light Weekend revealed everything I had feared. Brandon, Lucas, Chelsea, and Brooke had been planning this trip without any intention of reimbursing me. Their words were casual, almost gleeful, treating my excitement and hard work as something to exploit. I remember feeling a strange mix of shock and anger. The family I had devoted so much to had treated my sacrifice as an opportunity to enjoy a free vacation at my expense. Every pie baked before dawn, every hour spent sewing to save money, every late night counting my savings, none of it mattered to them. I gripped the key cards tighter, feeling the weight of all those weeks of preparation. For a moment, I considered hiding away, swallowing the humiliation quietly like I always had. But that was not who I wanted to be anymore. I realized, in a quiet yet fierce clarity, that I had reached the point where being used and overlooked would end. My children had underestimated me. They had assumed I would quietly bear the burden, paying for their vacation, smiling through their deception, and saying nothing. But I was not that woman anymore. I began to think through my options with a deliberate calm. First, I contacted the bank to ensure no one could attempt to reverse the charges or dispute my payment. The representative listened patiently and promised to flag my account, understanding the potential for elder financial abuse. Next, I spoke with the resort manager, explaining my concerns and asking for written confirmation that the reservation was solely under my name and that no one else could modify it without my consent. Finally, I reached out to my long-trusted lawyer, Ethan, who reassured me that I had every right to protect myself and offered legal documentation to solidify my position. Each call, each precaution, built a quiet sense of empowerment inside me. The betrayal that had once felt like a heavy weight pressing on my chest was beginning to transform into clarity and resolve. I realized that while they had thought I was merely a wallet, I had the power to take control of the situation completely. By that evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, looking out at the ocean beyond the balcony, feeling a new rhythm in my heartbeat. I was no longer reacting. I was planning, calmly and methodically. My family thought they were clever, thinking I would continue to bear the cost of their thoughtlessness. But now, I had a plan, and for the first time in years, it was entirely mine. I asked myself, quietly, if they would recognize the change in me. Would they realize that the quiet mother they had always discounted could take charge, set boundaries, and reclaim respect? I wasn't just protecting my money, I was protecting my dignity. And in that moment, I knew that the confrontation to come would not be about anger or revenge alone. It would be about demonstrating that I could stand up for myself, that I could assert my worth, and that their assumptions about me had been wrong all along. And with that thought, I let the quiet settle, feeling anticipation mixed with a deep sense of purpose. Tomorrow, the balance would shift, and for the first time, the trip would be about me as much as it had been about them. The next morning, I woke with a calm certainty I hadn't felt in years. I had spent so long being careful, always accommodating, always polite, always the one who sacrificed. But now, the situation had shifted. The keycards rested on the counter in my hand, and I could see the pool below, where Brandon, Lucas, Chelsea, and Brooke were already splashing with the younger children, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. I thought about every detail. My calls to the bank, the resort, and my lawyer had prepared me for this moment. I had control, and they had none. I reminded myself that this wasn't about revenge in the cruel sense. It was about setting boundaries, reclaiming respect, and demonstrating that their assumptions about me had been wrong all along. At precisely 10 o'clock, I watched the seconds tick by with Piper at my side. Her quiet presence grounded me, reminding me that this week was not just about confronting betrayal, but also about cherishing the bond we shared. I felt the faint pulse of anticipation mixed with a deep sense of calm. The moment arrived, and almost immediately, my phone buzzed. The messages came in Brandon and Lucas had tried their cards, and none of them worked. I could hear the soft murmur of panic spreading below as they realized something was wrong. Yet, I remained seated, sipping my coffee, feeling the warm sun on my skin. I allowed a small, private smile, knowing that for once, I was in the position of quiet authority. My heart was steady, my mind clear, and my resolve firm. By 11 o'clock, the resort staff had notified them of the changes I had authorized. 4 suites had been deactivated, leaving only mine active. I could feel the shift in energy, the sudden recognition that I was no longer the mother who could be taken for granted. They were now guests in a scenario I controlled entirely. I watched as Chelsea's frustration became visible, as Brandon and Lucas struggled to reconcile their plan with the reality before them. They had assumed they could manipulate. They had assumed I would comply without question. And now, the lesson was unfolding in real time. I felt no bitterness toward the children, only clarity. They needed to see the consequences of underestimating me, and I needed to feel the empowerment of standing firmly in my own truth. Piper, understanding more than anyone else, squeezed my hand gently. Together, we walked through the lobby, choosing to enjoy the week on our own terms. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that boundaries could be set, that dignity could be reclaimed, and that respect did not need to be demanded, it could be quietly enforced. As I sat back on the balcony that afternoon, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, I allowed myself a deep breath. For years, I had been the one giving, the one accommodating, the one who stayed quiet. And now, for the first time in a long while, I was simply present, fully in control, and unshaken. This moment, this week, was not about punishing my family. It was about rediscovering myself and understanding that sometimes the greatest acts of love are also acts of self-respect. After the initial tension settled, Piper and I decided to embrace the week on our own terms. We left Sab Shore behind and found a modest boutique hotel tucked beside the bay. It wasn't grand. There were no sprawling pools or chandeliers, but it had warmth, small comforts, and a quiet sense of belonging. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Piper's eyes lit up at the simple view of fishing boats rocking gently in the harbor, and I realized that joy doesn't come from extravagance. It comes from connection, honesty, and respect. I reflected on the lessons this experience had taught me. For decades, I had believed that being a good mother and grandmother meant giving without limits, always forgiving, and never asserting my needs. I had learned the hard way that love without boundaries is not love, it is surrender. Setting boundaries does not make me selfish. It protects my dignity and allows me to choose who deserves my time, attention, and energy. Each day, Piper and I walked along the harbor, shared pastries at a corner cafe, and built small sandcastles on a quiet beach. These moments, simple and unhurried, reminded me that happiness is not measured by luxury or how much others take from you. Happiness grows from being treated with honesty, from knowing your worth, and from surrounding yourself with people who see and appreciate you. I also realized that empowerment is quiet. It doesn't need to be loud or dramatic. I didn't ruin a family vacation. I reclaimed my own space and showed that even after a lifetime of accommodating others, I could stand firm and act decisively. Piper understood in her own way, quietly supporting me, and I felt gratitude that one of the younger generations could see the value in strength paired with kindness. Looking back, I saw that the betrayal, while painful, was a catalyst. It forced me to confront my own patterns, my unquestioned generosity, and my tendency to put others' comfort above my own. But it also revealed my resilience, my ability to strategize, and my capacity to act with both intelligence and compassion. I hope anyone listening who has ever felt overlooked or taken for granted understands this. Your voice matters. You are never too old to assert your worth, and you are never too late to change the story of your life. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors that open only for those willing to enter with respect. As I closed my notebook one evening, the harbor lights flickering on the water, I felt lighter than I had in years. This week was not about punishing my family. It was about rediscovering myself, finding peace, and teaching lessons in quiet dignity. The memories Piper and I created together were priceless, and the clarity I gained about love, respect, and self-worth would guide me for the rest of my days. If this story resonates with you, I invite you to share it with someone who may need a reminder that setting boundaries is an act of love and courage. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and remember that your story is yours to shape with integrity, strength, and heart.